Hey, welcome to the Joy Girl podcast. My name is Daira Avery Trainer. I'm really excited today. I have with me Brad Stine. So today we talk about when comedy and faith collide and making a difference unapologetically as a Christian. For over 20 years, Brad Stine has a desire to inspire believers to be bold and unapologetic about their faith in Christ. You may have seen him being featured on The Dry Bar, Fox and Friends, Huckabee, CNN, Promise Keepers conventions, and numerous other Christian broadcasts. Please help me welcome Brad Stine. Well, welcome, Brad. I am so excited to have you on this morning. You are, of course, very, very funny, and who better to talk to Joy about than someone who literally makes people laugh for a living everywhere they go. And so I'm going to kick it off with the question I ask everyone. I'm really curious about your answer. What is one thing that brings you joy?
Probably not that easy of a question, frankly, because joy is such a very specific word in a very specific sense of your humanness. You know, it's a fairly robust word. And I think it probably, like the word awesome, is overused and inappropriately used, frankly. I always saw the word as awesome as to be saved for things that are awe-inspiring, not for pizza night. That, hey, we're going to go to a concert, isn't that awesome? Or we're going to go see the Sistine Chapel, isn't that awesome? Yeah, that
Different
is.
experiences. Yep.
That
Yeah.
is. So joy to me is a very beautiful, sacred sense of the human experience because, of course, we're made in the image of God. Thus, everything that we experience that is of value, that is good,
Right.
is of God's essence. And so he must have joy, and he gives us access to that. But I don't know that we sit and define it that often. I don't know that we sit and are aware of what we're experiencing that we would categorize as joy. I think that's again a little flippantly utilized. I would say for me then, based on that long, over convoluted preface to my answer,
Okay.
thunderstorms bring me joy.
Thunderstorms. Well, I would not have thought you would have gone there. Okay.
I don't know if I mean, I'm sure I have, but for the most part, virtually every time a thunderstorm comes, and I live in Nashville, Tennessee, so we get a lot of them, and they're wonderful,
Yeah.
is I always thank God. It's my favorite weather, and I literally will go out. I always have to go sit in the porch, smell it, feel it, hear it, be awe-inspired by it. But it gives me a sense of joy because it's a very unique mixture of fear of God because it's very powerful and it can destroy, but
Right.
it's controlled and it forces you to put yourself in the proper category of where you belong in the in the universe.
Right.
And
Right.
so I'm joyful because I just love how I feel around it. I just love the whole tactile sense of it for me that reaches all
Yeah.
of my emotions. I don't know why. Maybe it's because as a kid I remember growing up in Indiana with thunderstorms and like I don't know. But to me that brings me joy. I just am moved by it without intent, without volition. And that to me is where joy is legitimately defined is when one isn't seeking it or
Right.
creating it, it simply is experienced. And that would be called a transcendent reality that
Right.
to me would fit the word joy. So my apologies, but I'm a comedian and autodidact, so I do not
Yeah.
have simple answers to anything that you
I
ask me.
I
So
I am so glad that you don't. And in Dallas, Texas, we get some pretty
yeah.
epic storms as well. And I work with teens and God moments and realizing the world is so much bigger than you. And
Mm,
so I like that you went there because, of course, I went on a whole journey in writing in joy. And one of the things God showed me pretty early on is I was writing on happy originally. So
mm,
I canned everything I was doing. He was like, I'm about to take you through some things. And man, I became a method actor to show you what joy really is. And so I start off, and I've had the craziest answers from popcorn to all things, but I like that you picked something that is an overwhelming sense of who God is really through the display of his glory
Yeah.
through nature. So we're gonna go totally out of order because you talk a lot and I don't, I'm not scripted. So I want to go right into hashtag God's comic and the intentionality you have with your career, but bringing truth into what you say and not just getting a cheap laugh, but you really have so much meaning in what you do. There's one thing I love that you say that when the creator of matter tells you you matter, then you have purpose, then you have self-esteem. And I love that because that speaks right into this idea of your identity and having confidence in who God made you to be. So all that to say, my question for you is, when did you decide that your craft was going to incorporate your faith? Was it
I
right off the beginning or a journey?
yeah. I wish. I wish I had decided that. But what happens is God decides for you. What happens if you're truly a believer is you lose, how do I say this so that it's true and accurate but yet is nuanced. To a certain degree, as a true Christ follower, you lose your autonomy,
Mm,
not your agency.
right.
So you always get to make the choice as to what you're going to do or not do. You know, it's interesting. If you are a believer in the transcendent and a believer in God, and certainly a Christ follower, if that's what you believe is true,
Right.
then you believe that you are eternal. You are a biological entity that's inhabited by an eternal spirit, and that you live forever.
Hmm.
And that, but the only time, of course, is as we sit here on this earth, is we're integrated with a biological three-dimensional force that is sort of in tandem with our spirit. But what's so interesting is this: the biology doesn't live forever, right? I mean, it corrupts, it
Right.
dies,
Right.
and yet it's how we start our existence. Now, how do we put ourselves into that timeline that is linear when we are believing that we live eternally? Well, there is no linear time in eternity. So we kind of started ex nihilo, joining the loop of eternity that God already existed in. But he lets us jump in with an actual time frame that we can say, I was born, I was conceived here, that was the beginning of me.
Right.
But then I live forever, forever. So what's interesting is that the amount of time that I will exist in eternity in a three-dimensional form is about as, there's not even a word for how minuscule that mathematics is,
Right. Yeah.
right? It's a blink. And yet, maybe the most significant part of your eternity,
Hmm. Yeah.
because it's the only time in my eternal existence that I can give something to God he doesn't have. It's the only time. When I'm in heaven, I'm known as I know, I see as I'm seen. There is no more tears, no more pain, no more fighting, no more walking, no more working, no more working out the salvation of fear and trembling. I'm
Right.
complete. I'm in
Yeah.
balance.
Mm.
This little speck, though, I can say, God, I'm not giving you that. I'm not doing that. I'm keeping that from you. I choose to disobey. This is the only chance, and it's also the only chance that I can garner some treasures, perhaps, that I can give back to God and say, hey, ain't much, but here's what I got for you. Thanks for the eternal salvation, right? So, that being said, again, as I promised, long, convoluted preface to any answer.
It's
Um,
okay. I'm tracking.
yeah,
It's
okay.
okay.
But what I mean by that is this. So, by the same token, a true Christ follower has to be aware that your life isn't yours, that God had you in mind, that there was a plan that He had, and that you are expected to participate in your sphere of influence that you will be given, wherever you're born, whatever your gender, whatever your ethnicity, whatever your time frame in history. This will be your responsibility, right?
Right. Yeah.
So when I became a comedian, and that was even an accident, I was a magician. I was a close-up
I was going
sleight
to
of hand
ask you about
magician.
that.
Yeah, I did what they call sleight of hand. You might be more familiar with it if you ever saw David Blaine or some of the guys that have won recently on America's Got Talent. They're what we used to call close-up magicians. But now they call them street magic or whatever, David Blaine. But I used to do that professionally, and I did it in a funny way. I just had a sense of humor, and so when I did my tricks, there was humor involved. So when I decided I wanted to do a stand-up show, a larger show, just for financial reasons, I need to be able to make more money. I knew that if I did a comedy magic show,
Hmm.
I could get into comedy clubs. That would give me more access to income. It was pragmatic. So I get into comedy clubs and I start watching comedians. I go, man, that to me is much more interesting than sleight of hand, because sleight of hand, even though there are people that are incredibly sophisticated at it and it's very difficult, people at the highest levels are like concert pianists. The things they can do is that difficult. I was not of that ilk. I was good, but not the top of the line. But I can teach you that. It's like juggling. You can teach somebody physical techniques to do something. But comedy, you either can do it or you can't.
Agreed.
You
I've seen
can't
enough
teach,
shows.
yeah,
Agreed.
you can't teach somebody to do comedy. You either A, have the sense of humor, the innate ability to be funny that comes from your instinct, or you don't. And then you have to take it, hone it, refine it. So when I got into comedy clubs and watched these other comics, I said, I'm more intrigued by this because I'm an artist. And so I'm more intrigued by a mind, a mouth, and a mic than I am having a prop. And so I began to winnow away the tricks, which were kind of, props that to me were cheating, and just see if I could get away with just words. And the words was eventually became my stand-up comedy show in nightclubs. I was a Christian, so I didn't curse. I didn't do
Right?
sexual jokes, like which is all you see now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I learned in the nightclubs where you have to be funny or you don't work. I had to go into the trenches. I wanted to be the best artists should be believers because we believe in a God that created all things. And we should go compete at the highest levels where the highest levels are competing. That's
I'm
my
I'm
take.
quoting you. Creativity is funnier than crude, and I
Yeah.
totally resonated with that idea because, I go to a lot of shows, and there's people that just go for, dirty and just for a quick laugh, but there's nothing profound. It's not well written. There's no concept behind it. And as a writer, I look at those things and think to myself, that's not true art. That's not true creativity. But then
Yeah.
you go even a deeper level because you aren't just in that moment trying to get a laugh, but you're actually trying to reveal a truth, something
Yeah,
greater.
I think though that we have to be careful, and I agree with you, but by the same token, we have to be careful because there is a sense of subjectivity that is inculcated into that perspective because there will be a lot of people who let me give me an example. A Bill Burr is very popular stand-up comic, very popular, and he's very funny, but he's very dirty, very dirty. Now, can we say, well, he's not funny? Well, no, he is. He's very funny. Uses the F word all the time. George Carlin was a brilliant writer of comedy. Atheist, militant, anti-God, crude. So we can't say they're not funny.
Right.
What I was trying to illuminate with that phrase you used was that I believe that there is a sophistication that is lost when one uses curse words in lieu of a nuance or a subtlety. That to me is what I'm getting at. They have a thing called modern art. Well, if you look at modern art and say, oh, yeah, all art's equal and it just happens to be this style now, and you say, no, it isn't. No, to have a red canvas and say this is brilliance and compare that to Rembrandt or the Sistine Chapel, and you see that these are equally proficient and equally artistic and equally awe-inspiring. If you really believe that, then you really don't understand depth. You're very myopic in the way you see the world.
Mm.
And I'm sad for you because you have a very limited version of what beauty should look like.
Right.
And it's a brokenness. But of course, modern art comes from postmodernism, which doesn't allow us to differentiate beauty and depth with anything else because in some way it's judging. Well, yeah, I'm judging it. That's crap compared to that. That's
Right.
all.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's not judging in a self-righteous way. It's judging in the ability to analyze something and choose to draw a conclusion. So when my comedy was able to allow me to make a living, when I was able to do that as a professional stand-up comic in nightclubs, as a headlining comic in the best clubs, improv, all these clubs that the best comics in the world are at, I was suddenly able to work for an agency in California that was called Clean Comedians, and they just booked clean comedians. And I remember thinking, well, that's perfect for me because I'm a clean comedian. So it's just another revenue source. That's
Right.
all.
Okay.
And when I went to work with them, they were booking me in churches. This is in the mid 90s. And I'm like, I grew up in the church. I never saw a comedian in a church my entire life. Didn't know that it existed. And I thought, well, I can do this. These are my people. I can work for them. I don't have to clean up my act. I know what I can do, what I can't do. I know what I can get away with, what I can't, because I'm a Christian. So I know who they are. I know the DNA of these folks. And I started working in these venues, in these churches. And something occurred where I found myself compelled to say more
Hmm.
than just humor. I didn't know why. I just found myself wanting to articulate a Christian worldview in context of stand-up comedy, which is no different than a Chris Rock or a Carlin. They have a worldview. Here's how blacks see the world. Here's how an atheist sees the world. Here's how a fat guy sees the world. Here's how a homosexual sees the world. That's what comedy does. It takes your perspective, throws it out there for everybody to understand your through line. How do you see the world? So I was saying, well, what about a Judeo-Christian perspective? What about I'm a conservative. I want to conserve freedom. I want to conserve religious liberties. I want to conserve wisdom of the ages. How about that? Let's see if there's a market for that. And and not only was there a market, but it was an underserved market
Mm-hmm.
and a
True.
neglected market. And so as I began to do it more and more and more, and it's a long story that it isn't really going to fit in your time frame. It was clear to me that God was saying, "No, no, no. I've called you to ministry. Uh, your gift isn't comedy. That's your flavor.
Hmm. I like that.
Your gift is communicating big, important ideas in a package that is palatable for the average listener. So the package is the funny, but the purpose is the message." And so that's when I realized that I was called to something bigger, that I am not my own. The church in America is crumbling. Heresy is running rampant. We are being weeded out, wheat and chaff, and God is judging us clearly. And what has happened is, and all you have to do, don't look at American Christians, and I always differentiate because I am a missionary to America. Uh, Go look at Chinese Christians. Go look at Iranian Christians. Go look at Pakistani Christians. Go look at Indian Christians. Go look at Turkish Christians. Go look at Iraqi Christians. Go look at North Korean Christians. Go look at, Morocco Christians. Go look at places where it is all in because this you don't your life is gone now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
American Christians have never been put in a position like that until now. And God is weeding out those who go to church but aren't Christ followers. And so, and He has to. It's always been this way. I hate it. I wish it wasn't the case. But it does, I think, come full circle, believe it or not. I actually have some cogent end game here. What you will find if you're truly a believer is it will bring you to your knees with the constant realization that you are not worthy of God, that you are a failure, you are a sinner, you are wretched, and He has completely forgiven you and sees you through a prism of the blood of His Son. You are holy, sacred, perfect, but you're not your own. And so I will take away every idol. I will take away every God that you have placed in my stead, whether it's cell phone or social media or your job or your comfort or your freedom or your safety or your ability to make a living. I will take everything because when I told you that I expect you to die for me, I wasn't kidding.
Right, right.
Now, as bleak as, as that can feel with the words,
Yeah.
when you reach that place of realization that nothing matters but God, when you reach the place that the end game is God wins every time, and when you realize that I'm just passing through, and I was trying to find solace and peace
Right.
and joy in a place that was not my destiny, but in fact was the place by which I could share with others, follow me, we're going to the place where joy is everlasting.
Well, and you touch on something so great when Paul talks about finding joy in any circumstance and learning to be content in everything. It's
Yeah.
not a shallow perspective, it's a depth perspective of seeing the end game, of seeing the
Yeah.
bigger picture. And what I love that I feel you're communicating very well is we all have been given something to share, and it's our responsibility. It talks about in scripture that the gifts are without repentance, so it's our responsibility for whatever God's given us. And if He happens to be the type that gives us a microphone, then we better use it for a purpose far bigger than ourselves, because we're
Yeah.
accountable for that. And
Yeah.
so, if it's magic, if it's comedy, if it's speaking, if it's singing, whatever it looks like, we have to honor Him in that. And we've been
But
comfortable
we
far
were
too
told
long.
that. We were told that. The last thing Jesus said was tell my story. He didn't say have altar calls. He didn't say have a coffee bar and build a mega church. He said tell my story. So that is our responsibility. And so I hope that your viewers, since your podcast is very theme specific, I hope they don't miss that everything I just spoke about is where joy is. Now, it seems antithetical because you're like, well, you spoke about a lot of challenges and difficulties that this earth brings, and thus it needs to be abandoned. No, God started us on earth. He created the universe for us. He said, I want you to partner with me, and that I'm going to let you choose to live in oblivion, but forever. Or if you choose to eat of this tree, you'll know what I know. It'll kill you. You'll die. There'll be a new way that you will reconnect to me, but you'll know different things. And so you'll have to retrieve joy, but this time it will be with volition. This time it'll be joy that you have searched for and have sought, as opposed to given to you blindly without you knowing the repercussions of losing it. So I want people to understand that I am not abandoning the three-dimensional realm and the as though it's bad or sinful, even though of course sin entered into it, but it was sacred and holy. That's how we started. So this is not about only caring about the other side and living on, forever with Christ, and that we have no obligation here. No, no, we start here. We do have an obligation here. And you know what people need more than anything is how to have joy when life sucks.
Thank you for going
I
there. I was going to go there. Yes.
listen to me. This is so important.
Right.
I don't need to teach you how to be happy when you're happy. I don't need to teach you how to have your stomach filled when it's filled and be okay. I don't need to teach you how to be kind when people are kind to you. Nobody has to learn that lesson. The lesson is, how am I happy when life brings misery? How am I happy when I lost my job, when I lost my child, when I lost my spouse to cancer or death or car wreck or murder or some other horrendous thing you could never imagine? Because if you can find it there, it's pure. If you find it there, you have answered the unanswerable question. Because what we're all seeking for is peace. We're all seeking for peace. And so what the lost are desperately looking for when they mutilate their genitals to become another gender, because they feel like that will bring them happiness, and it brings them further misery, because they haven't learned to find joy in simply the existence and the substance and the resting in the existence of your Creator.
Right. I think
That's where it is.
I totally agree. I think that goes back to our very identity of our purpose and why we were created. But it's interesting you went there without me even asking, because as I was writing the book on joy, and I wanted to give people easy principles to increase. I do think there's things we can do to have non-negotiables in place, to be a giver. There's things we can do to increase our joy and to live with it day in, day out. And it is different than happy, because it's not based on our emotions or our circumstances. But when I was writing, I just kept feeling in my spirit, I got to do something with tragedy. It would be a disservice to not say that joy and pain can live in the same space, because I know better. I know that it can. And of course, I never would have written my story this way. But as I was actually in Nashville and I was editing through some of the chapters, and I just kept feeling like, I've got to touch on pain. I've got to touch on, and I mean, that's not something you wake up thinking, oh, today sounds like a fun day to write on, something. I'm a very happy person in general. So this wasn't somewhere I necessarily wanted to go. And I got a phone call nobody wants to get. And my best friend passed away. And it was just in that moment. And it was that same weekend I felt I had to write. And so the book sat for, I'd say, a good year of just not knowing. And God had to really work through a lot of things in my life, but really deal with what can you share with somebody who has grieved or has gone through thing. And yes, there is an element of what you do, and laughter can bring a sense of temporary healing, but only God can fix what's broken in our lives. I've been a Christian long enough to know that, but to say you can still have joy even in the most difficult circumstances, that God can still fill you with something that doesn't make sense in the natural. And so speaking to somebody who's maybe listening and they're searching for joy, and maybe there's some easy things they can do to shift their perspective, but maybe there's been something that's just hit their life that was so unexpected and they're in a season of just grieving. What would you say to them, or how would you have them look at their situation differently? And of course, we could be speaking to anything. There was a time in my life where definitely it was difficult, and I knew I had to write on something I didn't want to write on, but I wanted to bring people peace, and I wanted people to understand that the joy still can continue despite hard things that happen in your life.
Well, first I would say the number one thing you need to know is I'm not there either. Nobody is. So do not look at somebody and say, though they figured it out. If only I could be like them. No, we're all on a journey working it out with fear and trembling. So we are searching for that. We are striving for that conclusion. But we're not there because we're humans and we fail and we have pains and miseries that we don't know how to necessarily always overcome. It's a challenge. So I don't. First thing I want them to not think of is, oh, if I could just reach that guy's status, I will understand it. No, I'm on the same path. I might be a little bit ahead of you, maybe, and I can teach you some roadblocks along the way, or vice versa. So the first thing is that. So don't look to people
It's good.
because they might have some wisdom and some experience. I'm not saying they don't have value, but they're not your answer. Secondly, there is no scripture verse that will make it all better. I don't mean that Christians don't mean well, because I think if they're true believers, they always mean well. But what could be a worse perspective than somebody just lost a loved one and they say, well, they're in a better place?
Yeah.
What?
No.
Excuse
Yeah.
me? Well, but at least we know where and I know they're trying in desperation to give some meaning to this thing because it's so horrific. But I think what is more important, of course, during the worst of times like that, is to not try to find some trite answer, but instead come alongside and just be a support for them to hold on to.
I agree.
Just be there for them and say, I'm not here to fix you, nor do I have an answer. I just want you to know that whatever you need, I'll try to help you with that. And if you had this experience yourself, one thing you can say is, the only thing I can tell you is I know exactly how you feel because I've been there too. So then they don't feel like it's this sort of unique thing that nobody else has ever had to experience. So that helps a little bit. And you say, but I'm not here to try to give you answers. Whatever you need to do, do. Cry, scream, yell, shake your fist, whatever is necessary. It's okay. God understands. And I'm here to support you the best I can. But I think that ultimately, you said it earlier when you said, Paul said, you know, I've been rich and I've been poor and I've learned in all things in that to be content. Notice that the contentment wasn't in being poor. I'm poor, now I'm content. No.
Right. Nope.
Well, I'm rich, now I'm content. What he was
No.
saying was, your circumstances will never be sufficient. Because if you're looking for circumstances to give you joy, it's going to come and go. It's
Right.
going to pass.
Yeah. Yeah.
The cancer was cured this time, not next time. You're going to die. So I think the depth of that scripture is what he basically saying is what the earth has to bring and what challenges and difficulties or good things come my way. I'm not resting on any of that because there's no answers in any of the exterior dynamics of existence. It will be going to God and saying, in the end, you're enough. And if you can do that, then it's not about the circumstances suddenly being endurable. The circumstances aren't what defines you. Never have been. They're God. It is hard. Sounds great in a podcast. Sounds
Right.
great on a bumper sticker. Sounds great in a meme. Sounds great. But to do it is going to be the most difficult thing in your life. But you will have moments. You'll have moments. God will always give you, like you said, laughter brings joy. It's real. It's real. But it's just a shadow
Yeah.
of what eternal joy will be. It's just a little clue God gives us to remind us this is really here. You are going to have it. But right now, do me a favor and rest in the joy that I'm here and I'm on the other side, because maybe, just maybe, you're an answer to somebody else's prayer instead of you
Right.
trying to always get yours answered. And perhaps the joy will be in finding out that what makes Christianity so difficult and yet amazing is you always have to give away what you need. I need grace. Go be graceful. I need forgiveness. Go be forgiving. I need joy. Go give joy.
That's good. I think you tied it with a bow, so anything else would do a disservice. That is beautifully said. Thank you so much. This, you talk to different people of different backgrounds and get their perspective on what they do for a living. They make people laugh, so you want to hear what joy is to them. But this was a whole nother level of deep, and clearly that speaks very highly to your relationship with Christ, and it just out of the
I hope
abundance
so.
flows. And so thank
Yeah,
you.
I
Thank you
think
so
that I feel
much.
like I always end my interviews like I was disappointing to people because I assume they're
Not at all.
expecting this is going to be the funny jokey interview, and I all I can say is I'm grateful that I can bring laughter. It's fun, and I
Yeah.
know it brings joy
Yeah.
to people, and it's good. It is the least important thing in my life.